Welcome back, everybody. And today we're going to be talking about too many books and a man who got evicted from his apartment from having too many books, apparently. So, book collectors love to say there's no such thing as too many books. I kind of agree with this. But a Manhattan landlord has now submitted a counter argument. So, basically, the guy had 10,000 books inside a 600 square foot studio apartment. At that point, it's not really a personal library anymore, and you're operating like a branch location. 600 square feet, I could reasonably see you doing that in a home. It'd be very cramped, but it's possible. And I know what 10,000 books looks like. And depending on the size and the weights, it would be doable. But in an apartment, especially if you're not on the ground floor, there's some real risk there. But anyway, we're gonna jump into the screen share and get on with the debate here because everybody loves the screen share, right? And we're sharing blah. All right. So the original article was printed from the New York Times. However, there is behind a paywall, so this is their Instagram one. I'll have links to the whole story and people that cover the story slightly differently down below, including this Instagram photo we're looking at. But yeah, let's jump back in. Do, 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 do. So before anyone takes sides, is I could see arguments for and against this. It's a little bit more complicated than evil landlord declares war on literacy. Um, these books were not arranged inside a grand library with mahogany shelves, a rolling ladder like Belle from Beauty and the Beast, and one of those green lamps that makes you look qualified to translate ancient Greek. They extended throughout a small Manhattan apartment, including into the bathroom and around the mattress where their owner slept. The building's management company said the collection created a fire hazard. Yep, there's one right there. The tenant said the books were not clutter, they were the intellectual foundation of his life. I could see that argument. So today we're looking at the case of Mendel Uminer, the New York scholar whose enormous personal library led his landlord to begin eviction proceedings. Was this a reader being punished for an unconventional life? Was it hoarding disguised as scholarship? Or was it simply a magnificent library trying to survive inside an apartment built for one person and maybe a houseplant? So let's talk about what happens when your to be read pile becomes a matter for housing court, the 10,000 book apartment. So Mendel Uminer is a 31 scholar, writer, and Hebrew translator. About a year before his story appeared in the New York Times, he moved into a studio apartment on Manhattan Upper East Side, roughly a block from Central Park. The apartment measured approximately 600 square feet. This is not impossibly small by Manhattan standards. It becomes smaller once you add 10,000 books, a mattress, a human being, and presumably one increasingly nervous smoke detector. So let me go ahead and go to image number two. Ah, they're everywhere. And I like how the shelves are bowing. That's mm, special. All right. Um, so, um, it, his collection reportedly included Judaism, philosophy, political history, literacy, criticism, poetry, fiction, theater, opera, and other subjects connected to his research. Books lined much of the apartment. They extended into the bathroom. They rose around his mattress. They occupied nearly every available area. Miner described the collection this way: every book I own, I need. My library is my manual for life. That's a beautiful statement. I really like it. It is also exactly what someone says when you gently suggest donating 17 duplicated editions of Kierkegaard. This was not merely a decorative collection designed to make visitors feel insecure about how little Dostoevsky they had read. Illuminar used the books to support work in translation, scholarship, publishing, and film. He was developing a forthcoming print quarterly called No Terracon, and if I've mispronounced that, I humbly apologize. Devoted to fiction, poetry, and criticism. Its planned contents include previously untranslated essays by Fernando Pessoa, a Yiddish translator of story, by Avram Reesen and material connected to Adam McKiswick's lectures on Slavic literature. So this was not a magazine aimed at people who thought the Da Vinci Code was a little too demanding. The library also supported film projects, and the collection itself it became the subject of a documentary. The apartment served as part home, part office, part research library, and part intellectual salon where writers, filmmakers, and academics gathered. It does sound wonderfully romantic. It also sounds like the kind of party where someone asks for the Wi-Fi password and receives a lecture about whether technology has alienated modern man from authentic experiences. So the landlord objects. Let's go on to our next lovely screenshot here. Ta-da. And over. So, the objection of said landlord. So eventually, the building's management company decided the library had crossed the line. Uminer received a notice accusing him of maintaining the apartment in a severely overly cluttered condition. The notice cited an over-accumulation of books and alleged that the combustible material created a fire hazard. Are books flammable? Yes. Do they combust on their own? They do not. All right. So management demanded that he substantially reduce the collection. When he did not, the landlord began eviction proceedings. The official complaint was not, this tenant reads too much. It was, we believe the physical condition created by these books is unsafe. I kind of agree. That is a much stronger argument than simply objecting to someone's decorating choices. Although once the bathroom becomes part of the shelving system, interior decorating may no longer be the correct department. There is also an important limitation. The public available reporting does not cite FDNY inspection, an engineering report, or an independent expert assessment declaring that this particular apartment was unsafe. The fire hazard claim came from the building management. That does not mean the concern was invented. It means we should describe it accurately as a plausible allegation, not as a proven technical finding. Was the safety concern legitimate? In general, extreme quantities of possessions can create real-life safety problems. The National Fire Protection Association warns that heavily cluttered homes may contain excessive combustible material, obstruct escape routes, this I agree with, endanger firefighters, also agree with this, and make searches more difficult, also agree with that. New York City similarly advises residents to keep exits and escape routes clear. I agree with this. Those concerns are legitimate, very much so. Books burn, books are heavy, books can restrict access. This is why libraries usually have building plans and not just one guy saying, stack the encyclopedias near the radiator. It'll probably be fine. It won't be fine. But applying those general concerns to Uminer's apartment is not completely straightforward. Reports that most of the books were shelved and the entrances and exits were not blocked. That does not prove the apartment was safe. It does complicate the image of Uminer crawling through tunnels made from Penguin classics. The responsible conclusion is simple. Management raised a reasonable concern, but the public reporting does not provide enough independent evidence to determine exactly how dangerous the apartment was. Anyone online claiming the floor was definitely about to collapse has roughly the same engineering qualifications as anyone claiming the apartment was perfectly safe. I agree with this. We have photographs, we have news reports, we have thousands of people who became structural engineers 5 minutes after reading the headline. What we do not have is a professional assessment of that floor. How structurally sound was it? How old is the building? What was the material used? So, was he actually evicted? Let's go on to our next image here. Ta-da! And many headlines say Uminer was evicted for owning 10,000 books. That captures the conflict, but it simplifies the legal sequence. Management began eviction proceedings. Uminer initially fought the action in court. He eventually chose to relocate rather than reduce the library. Friends then helped him box and move the collection. Under New York's formal process, an actual eviction involves a court-authorized warrant and a marshal or sheriff removing the tenant after the required notice. The reporting does not establish that Uminer reached that final stage. The most accurate description is that the landlord's eviction case forced the issue, and Uminer ultimately agreed to leave. That does not make the move voluntary in the normal sense. When your choices are remove most of your books or continue fighting an eviction case, nobody's handing you a menu and asking whether you prefer soup or salad. It's a choice. But this was not. As far as the reporting establishes, a judge pounding the gavel and declaring, I find the defendant guilty of aggravated reading. Remove this man and all copies of Dostoevsky from the premises. So, moving 10,000 books, let me go over to the next, I believe our final image. I like his reaction. Don't touch it. Anyway, so yeah, his friends helped move and place the collection in thousands of boxes to move out reportedly during heavy rain. That's no. I would wait till it stopped raining, but okay. For anyone who has ever moved even two bookcases, this is where the real horror story begins. 10,000 books do not get moved. 10,000 books launch a regional logistics operation. You need boxes, you need vehicles, you need dollies. You need several friends who not yet understand that their relationship with you is about to be tested by a complete hardcover encyclopedia set. Accurate. Someone stands inside the movie truck saying, there's room for one more box. There is never room for one more box. Eventually, everyone begins privately wondering whether setting fire to the collection would have been more efficient, thereby accidentally supporting the landlord's argument. It would have been easier to move, that's for sure. So it really comes down to library versus hoard. I'm a big proponent of books in translation, and he is a translator, and he's also has some other interests, as we mentioned, some things he was into. But to me, I'm on the landlord side here. It's too many books, and there's lots of questionable, may come to reality, may not, but you are a renter. You're not an owner, where you can do whatever the hell you want inside the confines of your own home. And even then, the homeowners association may get you. But people with these large collections, what they usually end up doing is getting a storage unit, climate controlled, of course, to house their collections and pull things when they need to be pulled. And they'll have a smaller subset of stuff they're actively engaged in or their displays copies at their home. Um, Most human beings, I believe in the US, if they're a heavy, heavy reader, maybe can read 4,000 books in the entirety of their life. Now, I'm not saying 10-page books count in this. I'm not saying like 300-page books or more, or maybe 200 pages or more, or some variance of, but it's about that number. And let's give him a little bit more leeway here because he is a translator. Maybe 2,000 more, so 6,000 books as reference material I could see, but 10,000 is a little overboard. Anybody can do what they want. You can have 10,000, you can have 100,000 books, but there's not a way for you to read all of them. It's humanly impossible. It's like that Twilight Zone. I have all the time in the world, and his glasses break, and he's sad because he can no longer read. But yeah, I'm on the landlord side here. Is what I'm ultimately going to come down to. But on the general question of a library versus hoard, this is where this particular story gets a little bit more interesting. Umar said he did not consider himself a hoarder. I believe he believes that, but I also don't believe he utilized 10,000 books exactly to the T. Some is pleasure reading, he's going to read them once. Some is for research. Some is for upcoming research, like you have projects, right? Doesn't mean you're actively working on all projects all the time, but you have plans to. So, based on the available photographs and descriptions, this was not the stereotypical hoarding environment involving garbage, spoiled food, broken appliances, and narrow tunnels through unusable rooms. It was a specialized collection. It was actively used. Most of it was reportedly shelved, but a collection can be purposeful and still overwhelm the space containing it. That's the key thing I'm going to focus on. You can carefully organize 3 elephants by height and alphabetical order. Your landlord may still object to keeping them in a studio apartment. Now, psychologically, the American Psychiatric Association distinguished collecting from hoarding disorder. Collectors generally acquire objects intentionally, then organize, appreciate, or display them. Sounds like most book people. Hoarding disorder involves persistent difficulty discarding possessions and clutter that interferes with the normal use of the living space. Like they have a trash corner, and then suddenly the whole place is a trash corner. Uminar's situation contains facts pointing in both directions. The books were connected to his work and intellectual interest. Um, at the same time, extended into areas used for sleeping and bathing, and the collection created conflict severe enough to threaten his housing. But a photograph and a book count are not enough to diagnose a psychiatric order. The clinical question and the housing question are not the same. We do not need to diagnose Umnar to ask whether he had too much material for that apartment, and we do need to declare the apartment perfectly safe to organize that the word hoarder may have been used too casually. So, one man's hoard is another person's library, maybe? I don't know. There's also an obvious issue involving wealth, space, and cultural status. Fran Lebowitz has said that she owns approximately 12,000 books. Her collection is kept in antique bookcases, many with glass doors. When Architectural Digest discussed her books, they are presented as a charming feature of an elegant literary life. Poet James Fenton and writer Daryl Hickney have also been celebrated for keeping more than 10,000 books inside a restored Harlem house, where the collection is spread across a much larger residence. The number is similar. The cultural reaction is completely different. 10,000 books inside antique glass fronted cases or a magnificent private library, 10,000 books distributed through a restored townhouse or an interior design feature, 10,000 books inside a rented studio or an overaccumulation. That does not prove, really, that Uminar was treated unfairly. Space matters, shelving matters, access matters. Townhouse can accommodate things that would overwhelm a studio. A swimming pool is a luxury in your backyard. It is a serious maintenance problem in your kitchen. But these examples show that the number alone does not decide whether we call something a library or a hoard. Context decides, square footage decides, presentation decides. And whether we enjoy minting it or not, money often decides. A wealthy homeowner surrounded by books is an eccentric intellectual, perhaps. A renter surrounded by those books may be treated as a safety problem, probably and perhaps. Sometimes that distinction is reasonable. Sometimes it reveals who society believes is allowed to take up space. So the internet, us, if you're listening to this, you're on the internet, as respected Reddit immediately assembled a fully qualified legal fire safety, structural engineering, pest control, and psychiatric advisory board. So on Reddit, some comments focused on the weight of the books, others worried about fire or access. Some concluded that 10,000 books and 600 square feet was obviously excessive. Others argued that a wealthier person with the same collection in a larger home would be praised rather than mocked. Reddit is useful as a record of public reaction here. It is not evidence the apartment had past structural damage or a specific code violation. The most interesting argument was not really about engineering, it was about language. When does a collection become clutter? When does an eccentric become a disorder? And how much square footage must surround your books before strangers stop calling you a hoarder and start calling you a bibliophile? Do you have to read every book? I mean, this was another predictable response. There's no possible way he has read all 10,000 books. Almost certainly not. Even reading one book every day would take more than 27 years. That assumes you never read anything, never take a day off, and somehow finish War and Peace before lunch. But a private library is not a trophy case displaying a completed assignments. It may contain reference works, future readings, alternate editions, rare text, and books that could become useful when a new question arises. In The Black Swan, Nassim Nicholas Taleb used Umberto Eco's enormous library to explain the idea of an anti-library. Unread books represent what remains unknown and what may become useful later. An unread book is not necessarily a failed purchase. Sometimes it is a tool waiting for the correct question. I agree with this very much. Sometimes also a book you bought 7 years ago because the cover looked nice. Both categories exist. Uminar's argument was not that he had personally consumed every word inside the apartment. His argument was that the collection formed the intellectual equipment of his life. Yeah, I understand that. I also understand a landlord looking at the bathroom wondering whether some of that equipment could be located away from the shower. Both things can be true. So who was right? Huh. Uminer absorbs more sympathy than most mocking versions of the story give him. This was not a man filling an apartment with disposable junk. The book supports scholarship, translation, publishing, film projects, and an intellectual community. Yes, this statement is true. There is something admirable about building a life around reading and ideas, especially in a culture where every physical object is expected to justify its existence by being minimal, beige, and approved by a literary lifestyle influencer. But admiration does not repeal physics. Approximately 10,000 books inside a 600 square foot apartment is an extreme collection inside a very limited space. Management was justified investigation and raising safety concerns. I support their investigation, actually. What the evidence does not allow us to say is that every allegation was proven, the floor was about to collapse, or the owner had a psychiatric disorder. The landlord had legitimate concerns. So raising the question, I think, is fine because they are safety concerns in an apartment building. But Umar had a legitimate reason for valuing the collection. I can't fault the man for valuing his books. The real problem was the mismatch between the library and the apartment containing it. Umar did not necessarily own too many books, he owned too many books for that particular space. That distinction matters. A whale is not too large, it is too large for the bathtub. So, fortunately, the story did not end with 10,000 books abandoned on a Manhattan sidewalk. Umar and his friends moved the collection, and reporting indicated that he found another place to live. The library continues to support his publishing and film projects while becoming the subject of a documentary. Solution was not fewer books, it was more space. That may be the most book collector ending imaginable. Umar did not emerge from housing court, stare truthfully into the distance, and buy a Kindle. He found a larger habitat. So, I'm probably gonna get all kinds of comments here. So I do want to hear from you. Was the landlord justified in demanding that the collection be reduced? Was Omanar treated a hoarder because he was a renter without a mansion or dedicated library? And at what point does a personal library generally become too large for the space containing it? I want you to leave your answers in the comments because I bet you all the answers are going to be a little bit different. And I want you to be honest. Um, because if your first response is I don't know exactly how many books I own, you already be farther along this journey than you realize. Um, so here, let me end the screen share here. And there we go. Um, I do think you should keep reading. I do think you should keep collecting and occasionally confirm that your front door can still open. I think all three of these things need to be done. And yeah, so I think that's going to do it. Again, the articles will be down in the description down below for you to peruse the actual articles themselves if you so want to. Um, and yeah, I want to hear from you down in the comments. I do have a Patreon, which is a book club. If you like reading cool books with cool people, do the cool thing and join the Patreon. Um, I also have links to other things that you can peruse down there as well. And I think that's going to do it for the day. And as always, keep on booking on.